Lena said it in a whisper that slid under the grill smoke and stuck to the back of my throat. Ava was laughing too loud with a glass of cheap rosé, the kind that stains the lips so you can measure the truth by the rim of a cup. I stood by the charcoal, tongs in one hand, hearing the words that snapped the bone of our life clean through. "If you tell her husband," Lena said, eyes on me like a dare, "I will leave you." Not I might leave. Not I could leave. I will. I flipped the burger and let it hiss, fat spitting against the grate like punctuation. The patio lights buzzed with mosquitoes, and someone's playlist, a sad mix of late 2000s summer anthems, tried to convince the night it was still young. Nobody noticed that I was watching fingerprints print themselves on the stem of her glass. Nobody noticed I set the tongs down as careful as a surgeon. "You should not get in the middle of someone else's business, Nate," she added, voice low, controlled, a judge delivering a sentence no lawyer could appeal. "This is grown-up stuff. Stop playing hero." Hero. I am a municipal building inspector. I write notes about stair risers and egress and whether a corridor is too narrow for a stretcher. I have a clipboard, not a cape. Heroes want to be seen. Inspectors are the guys you pretend you did not see, then curse when we post the temporary closure sign. We're the quiet threat of consequence in a world that has learned to shrug at consequences. I did not answer. I did not make a scene. I watched the last of the light slide off the rusted roofline of the old mill, watched the sky turn bruise-purple over the river, and I filed her words the way I file everything, paper-sleeved and dated and tucked where I can reach it at a moment's notice. I file because remembering is not the same as holding on. Remembering is a kind of accounting, and accounts, no matter how ignored, always come due. Later, when we were alone, I asked Lena who was going to drive Ava home. She said Dylan would do it. The name hung there like a heavy tool you drop the second you realize it is going to take a tow with it. "Fine," I said. "Have fun." She stared at me, trying to read the tone behind the words, but I gave her nothing. Silence, when measured correctly, is more precise than any argument. I took my keys off the hook by the door and walked out to the truck. The night air smelled of wet cedar and the ashes of a party already fading. I opened the glove box and slid an envelope over the registration. Inside were receipts and notes and a neat row of flash drives labeled by month. I am not a paranoid man. I am a man with memory and a habit. I whispered it to the steering wheel because the cab was the only witness I trusted. "I do not forget things," I said. "I file them." The engine ticked as it cooled, and in that ticking I heard the clockwork of everything I'd ever let slide. Every offhand comment, every disappeared afternoon, every smile too sharp at the edges. Lena believed threats were leverage, but threats are just words until someone keeps a record. I sat there longer than made sense, long enough for the house lights to wink out one by one, long enough for the laughter inside to curdle into that tired hush people wear when the wine runs out and the secrets settle. I watched the porch through the reflection in my windshield, not head-on. Direct staring is aggression. Reflected watching is strategy. There's a difference between silence and surrender. She has never understood that. The next morning smelled like burned coffee and unsaid apologies. Lena moved around the kitchen with the careful choreography of someone pretending nothing was wrong. She wore the robe I bought her on our 3rd anniversary, the one she said made her feel expensively careless. She tied the belt too tight, like she was holding herself shut. "You're up early," she said, not turning around. "Inspection downtown," I answered. "Old library renovation." She nodded, poured coffee into a mug without asking if I wanted any. The omission was a message. I watched the steam. "Did Dylan get Ava home?" She paused. Not a freeze, not guilt, just calculation. "Yes. Why?" "Nothing. Just wanted to know." She finally faced me, holding the mug like a peace offering she had no intention of delivering. "Nate, don't start. Not everything is evidence." "But it is. Everything is evidence. The world is built on load-bearing details. My job is just a job, but it's also training. You learn to see the flaw before the collapse, the crack before the leak. Life has codes, too. People violate them all the time. Most buildings fail slowly. So do marriages." "You threatened to leave me," I said. Calm, factual, as if reading it off an inspection report. Her eyes flinched, even though her voice didn't. "I said what I said because you were about to do something stupid." "Stupid like telling the truth? Stupid like thinking it's your truth to tell?" We let that hang there. It had weight. "Whose business is it?" I asked. "When someone sets fire to a house that still has people in it?" She recoiled, not bodily, but in that way a person's gaze steps back. "Don't make this dramatic. Ava can handle herself. Her marriage is hers to manage." "And the affair?" She blinked once, slow. Also hers. And Dylan? A shrug, her version of pleading the fifth. People make choices. And consequences? She smirked, but it cracked. That's what grown-ups live with. I almost laughed. Grown-ups. As if the world were divided into brave adults and the children who still believed in fairness. I set my empty hands on the counter. You made a threat last night, I said. I just want you to know. I filed it. She didn't understand what that meant. Not yet. Work was a relief. Nothing personal about concrete. Nothing vindictive about measurements. Steel doesn't lie unless someone tells it to. I walked the old library's north stairwell, writing notes. Tread depth, loose railing, exit signage blocked by a stack of donated encyclopedias. The contractor followed me, chewing his pen like it might answer a question he couldn't. You always this detailed? He asked. This is the least detailed I get, I replied. Safety is made of the things people assume don't matter. He grinned at that, but not mockingly. You ever get tired of studying what can go wrong? No, I said, because it always does. I left the building with a clipboard full of small failures waiting to be corrected. Small failures are better than big ones. They warn you. They give you a chance to brace. My marriage had stopped issuing warnings. That evening, Lena came home late. No explanation offered. None asked. She kicked off her shoes at the door, dropped her purse with a thud that said she wanted me to comment. I didn't. I'm making pasta, she said, not looking at me. Do you want any? I already ate. She froze at the stovetop. You usually wait. I usually know where my wife is. What she wanted to say died in her throat. I could see it, the sentence forming, then collapsing under its own dishonesty. Don't act like I'm cheating on you, she said finally, voice thin. I didn't, I answered. But it's interesting that's where your mind went. You can't police everyone's morality, Nate. No one asked you to be the conscience of the neighborhood. I don't police, I said. I document. They're different jobs. What are you going to do? She challenged. File people into folders? Label your friends like hazard zones? If necessary. She laughed then, a brittle, desperate sound. You think keeping records makes you safe? That it gives you control? No, I said. But it keeps me honest. You want honesty? She snapped. Fine. Ava's unhappy. Dylan gives her attention her husband doesn't. That's the whole story. Are you happy now? Is your moral balance restored? I shook my head slow. You think unhappiness justifies explosions because you've never stood inside a collapsing structure. You think fallout hits only the guilty. She opened her mouth, closed it, looked away. The steam from the pasta rose between us like a bad metaphor neither of us wanted to claim. The thing about filing is that it isn't revenge, it's readiness. I don't pull folders unless I need them, but now I could feel them pulsing, wanting to be used, like tools that know the shape of the job ahead. That night, after she fell asleep pretending not to be awake, I sat at the kitchen table and opened the envelope from the truck. Printed emails, text screenshots, a timeline of evenings that didn't add up, excuses that unraveled if you pulled the wrong thread. None of it was about Lena, none of it was about me. Sometimes it just teaches someone how easy matches are to strike. I created a new folder, labeled it Lena, Statements, Threats. I typed up last night's words, added the date, the time, the witnesses, the context. I wasn't planning anything. Planning implies anticipation of violence. This was insurance. Accuracy is the only weapon that doesn't need to be drawn to be dangerous. I slept badly. Dreams of stairwells with missing steps, of alarms that wouldn't sound, of people walking calmly toward a wall of flame because someone they loved told them there was nothing there. Days passed. The air thickened, not with weather but with choices. Lena avoided names in conversation. I avoided pretending not to notice. At work, I cited a daycare for using a bookshelf to block an exit route. The owner argued, I nodded, took photos, filed the report. Every system, no matter how cheerful, needs a path out when things go wrong. At home, no one was building exits. A week later, Ava's husband showed up at the hardware store while I was buying masonry screws. He was holding lumber and smiling like the world was fair. Nate, good to see you, man. Lena said I should pick your brain about basement steps. Mine are questionable. I stared at him. This man repairing stairs in a house already caving from another direction. He had no idea. None. You want my advice? I said. Check what's above the stairs before you fix what's under them. He laughed. That sounds philosophical. Just structural, I said. But he didn't hear the difference. He walked away, humming. I watched him go and wondered how many people live inside structures they think are sound simply because no inspector has posted the notice yet. That night, Lena came into the living room with the look of someone about to perform emotional surgery without anesthesia. I talked to Ava, she said. And? She's scared you'll say something. Good. That's not what I meant. It's still good. She sat, hands knotted in her lap. Why are you like this? Why can't you just let people live their lives? Because lives overlap, I said. Because consequences aren't polite enough to stay where they're put. She leaned forward. You're not responsible for saving everyone. I know, I said. I'm responsible for not lying to myself about what I see. She closed her eyes. You would burn down friendships just to feel right. No, I said. I would document the arson. The fire sets itself. Her voice dropped to that whisper again, the one that started all of this. If you tell him, I will leave. I know, it's on file. She looked at me then. Really looked. Like she was seeing the filing cabinet behind my ribs, the precise rows of unforgotten things. You scare me sometimes. You scare me too, I said, but only because you think fear is leverage. Silence. Heavy, but not final. What happens next isn't cinematic. No dramatic reveal at a dinner table. No screaming confession in the rain. Real collapse is quiet, progressive, structural. A beam buckles, a wall shifts. A person stops trusting the way another person breathes. But emails get backed up. Phone logs get printed. Names get dated. Truth calcifies when left undisturbed long enough. One night, Lena came home and didn't speak at all. She moved through the house like a ghost rehearsing possession. I heard her unzip a suitcase. I heard the careful folding of clothes. I didn't stop her. When she came downstairs, bag in hand, she looked at me as if waiting for a line I didn't owe her. You're really not going to say anything? She asked. I already said everything, I replied. Now we're just living the record. She swallowed. You think being right is the same as being good. No, I said. I think pretending wrong isn't happening is how things fall on people who don't deserve it. She gripped the handle of the suitcase. You'll be alone. I already am, I said. She left. The door clicked, soft as a signature at the bottom of a form. I didn't chase her. I didn't flash the file like a badge. I just sat at the table, listening to the house settle around the new absence. The next day, I opened the folder, added one more line, result, threat executed, no further action required. Then I closed it, filed it, placed it where it would stay unless needed, but not forgotten, because I am not a man of vengeance. I am a man of records, and records aren't about punishment. They're about memory. Memory is the only structure strong enough to survive the fire. Outside, the world kept going. Mail arrived. Sunlight hit the porch in its daily angle. Somewhere, someone laughed too loudly over cheap wine. Somewhere, someone whispered a threat they thought would vanish with the smoke. But I don't forget things. I file them. And someday, when the building finally gives way and people ask how it happened, there will be a record. Not to say I told you so. Just to say, the signs were there. The truth was measurable. The collapse was not sudden. It was documented. It always was. Before we continue, hit the hype button, subscribe, and like the video to help the channel grow. Tell us which city you are from in the comments. We'd love to get to know our audience better. Half the ground floor is a boutique gym now, fronted by glass and painted with aspirational verbs. Lift, rise, breathe. All caps commands for people who like to sweat in front of mirrors and call it therapy. In back, the concrete ramps switch back into a garage with cameras bolted to the corners like metal barnacles. I know those cameras because the city approved the permits. I know which ones were real and which were decoys because I read the purchase orders when the developer tried to cut corners, swapping out 2 high-res domes for hollow shells that blinked but never recorded. Developers always assume inspectors are either lazy or blind. They never consider that some of us just enjoy remembering things. I had a morning re-inspection on a coffee shop in the mill. The owner wore a beard that cost more in grooming products than I spend on boots in a year. He thanked me with a tone that suggested the city had personally plotted to ruin his grand opening. After I signed off on a fire suppression line that finally ran parallel where it should have from day one, I took the long way down to my truck. That long way included a pause in the garage security office where a chalkboard still had last week's festival parking notes. 15 lot flat, no overnight, level 4 full. The public monitor cycled 4 angles: ramp view, entry kiosk, stairwell landing, and a single wide shot of levels 3 and 4. Nobody was there. The door was open. Public feed on a wall display, not a locked console. I looked. 2 minutes. Maybe 2.5. I am the guy who writes people up for propped fire doors, not the guy who steals tapes. I know the line because I've drawn it for other people more times than I can count. There was Lena's car, nose out on level 3 at 9:41 p.m. The timestamp blinked in the corner, indifferent, unaware it was documenting a fuse being lit. A minute later, the stairwell door near the blind spot swung and then swung again. That blind spot is famous in maintenance, not in the public. It's a wedge of darkness shielded by an old support beam and a camera angle that never got adjusted. It is the kind of thing that gets a sticky note on a clipboard and never moves until somebody like me writes a line that puts dates in front of names. A minute after that, Dylan's truck rolled past. Vanity plate, Dylan D. He had it custom, weird flex for a guy who claims to love minimalism. Minimalists never have vanity plates. I looked away after those 2 minutes because I know the line. And then I walked out, and no one had to drag me. I did not print anything. I did not copy anything. I wrote down the public time on a small spiral pad I carry, the kind reporters used to use before everyone trusted their phones to remember what their brains won't. If anyone asked, I was looking at the garage to make sure the emergency exits were not blocked by lazy parking, and you could not prove otherwise. Intent is not evidence. Evidence is not opinion. I deal in the former, not the latter. On my lunch break, I called the city parking office and asked for public records, a list of paid tickets from the levels of the mill garage for the past 2 weekends. Anyone can request that. I did it as a resident, not a city employee. You fill out a form, you wait for a clerk who has not had coffee, you smile, you go away. Transparency exists, but only for the people patient enough to dig through the mud. On the way home, I set a tile in the bottom liner of the big blue cooler that Lena and I share for tailgates. Joint property. Bought it together at a Labor Day sale before we stopped sharing receipts and started sharing silences. That cooler spends more weekends in her trunk for staging jobs than it does in my garage. The tile chirped once behind the insulation foam, a bird swallowed by plastic. I closed the lid and rolled it to the shelf. Casual, unremarkable. Some people set traps. I set reminders. That night, Lena told me she was going to Ava's to help rehearse Wink Wink for the charity gala. Wink Wink. The kind of phrase people use when they need humor to camouflage guilt. I said nothing. I watched a baseball game on mute and listened to the tiny ping on my phone as the cooler went for a ride. At 10:14 p.m., the dot was on the parkway. At 11:03, it paused in a strip mall lot. At 12:22 a.m., the dot settled on a mill address. The gym, level 3. Same coordinates I'd written down. After an hour, the dot went dark. Battery saver or someone noticing the cooler was too heavy and leaving it in the trunk. A normal thing that did not feel normal. She came home at 1:47 a.m. Keys dropped too gently, shoes in hand, the performative quiet of someone trying not to trigger the dog that doesn't exist. I was awake, eyes closed, body still. There's a kind of listening you learn when you've stayed too long in a burning structure. You count each sound the way you count exits. In the morning, she made coffee, but not conversation. The cooler was back in the garage. No one mentioned it. That's the new language of our house. Silent acknowledgments of things neither of us will name out loud. I slept on my side of the bed, my back to her, because even gravity knows how to pick a team. The mattress dip between us felt like a trench. She breathed like someone who wanted to believe I was the problem, and I breathed like someone who already had the report written, stamped, and ready for archive. There is a point in every collapsing structure where the failure stops being theoretical. You don't see it from the outside, not yet, but you feel it. The nails no longer hold. The beams no longer trust each other. The floor waits for a weight that will finish the job. And still, to the untrained eye, the house stands. It always stands, right up until it doesn't. I am not waiting for the collapse. I am just documenting it. They say you should not get in the middle of another marriage. I say if someone drags you there and hands you a map, you follow the roads you can prove anyone else could follow. I put a plain manila packet together with information that did not require a wiretap or a prayer. Screenshots of public stories where the geotag did not disappear before a friend of a friend captured it. a printout of the parking payment log that shows a plate on level 3 at a specific time. Times and places. No accusations, no language a lawyer could call defamatory. Facts that make their own implications. Ava's husband is a quiet man who sells plumbing fixtures and gives discounts to anyone who brings a dirty thermos into his shop. He answered his door on a Tuesday and heard me out without trying to swing at me. That counted as a win. He looked down at the packet. He looked up at me with eyes that had just learned shame, the kind where you think you should have known but only now realize you were trying not to. I am not telling you this to break your life, I said. I am telling you because your life is being broken without your vote. Do whatever you need to do with it. He nodded once. His voice was gravel. I appreciate it. We shook hands. I walked back to my truck. The river smelled like wet pennies. My phone buzzed. The tile blinked again at the gym. I did not chase it then. I waited because patience is the only tool that never fails inspection. At home that night, Lena kissed me like nothing had happened. Wine on her breath, citrus lotion, the kind of practiced affection that slides across skin without finding a place to land. You are quiet, she said. I am thinking about stair risers, I said. She laughed. Of course you are. The first time I followed Dylan, it was accidental the way a fire is accidental after you stack oily rags in a corner and keep promising yourself you will wash them. I saw his truck leave the gym at 10:58 p.m. I was on level 2 of the garage because I like the roofline view of the mill with the lights strobing from the yoga studio. I turned my headlights off and waited. He took the ramp fast. I slid in a lane behind him and kept it steady. He must have seen me in the mirror because he cut left to block. The ramps are tight. The concrete is old. There is a point on level 3 where the spiral kisses a pillar, and if you are not familiar, you put a scar on your bumper that never goes away. He tried to box me, backing his truck toward me with his brake lights pulsing like a warning. I dropped the column shifter into reverse and let the truck roll downhill the way I would slide a tape measure back into the sleeve. My dash cam blinked blue the whole way. He could not chase both directions at once. I reversed into an empty lane and popped into a parking space like it was planned. He shot past me, horn blaring, and the noise ricocheted around the concrete like a bad idea in a group chat. Lights flicked. A flashlight tapped my window. Officer Park, small town, sensible shoes, the kind of presence that calms instead of provokes. Cool driving, she said, deadpan. Want to tell me why you are playing ballet with a gym owner at 11 p.m.? I am not playing anything, I said. I came up for air. He found me. That makes no sense. Neither does a vanity plate that says Elevoit, I said. But here we are. She looked past me at the ramp. She looked down at my dash cam with the little blinking light. Then she leaned in, voice low. Stay on the right side of the line, Nate. I am standing on it, I said. I am not crossing. There are 2 ways to get in trouble in my job. One is to look the other way and let a shortcut stand because you want to be liked. The other is to take your authority personal and try to turn the codebook into a revenge story. I am not a saint. I am not a fool either. I've spent enough years in the gray space between those 2 mistakes to know that virtue is mostly a matter of timing, and discipline is just a word people use until they need an exception. Every inspection starts as paperwork and ends as a judgment call, and judgment calls have a way of collecting interest you never planned to pay. Park let me go with a warning that sounded like a favor and felt like a checkpoint, the kind of warning that comes with a reminder that the balance sheet between 2 men is never fully settled. He didn't say he'd be watching me, but I heard it anyway, tucked somewhere between the last handshake and the forced smile. I drove home through streets that pretended to be asleep, porch lights glowing like lazy eyes half open, traffic signals changing for no one, the city breathing in long, silent drags. The house glowed with the soft light of staged success, pillows fluffed, candles unused, a bowl of limes because a bowl of lemons would be 2 on the nose. A decorator's fantasy of warmth, the kind you can photograph but never sit comfortably inside. It looked like a life curated to impress strangers, not lived in by the people who paid the mortgage. I always felt like a guest in my own home, someone allowed to stay as long as I didn't move anything out of place. The quiet inside wasn't peaceful. It was rehearsed. Lena was waiting in the kitchen with a half smile, phone in hand. She didn't bother pretending she'd been doing anything else. The phone was angled just so, screen brightness high, as if she wanted the glow to accuse me before she ever said a word. Her hair was tied up the way she did when she wanted to appear calm, collected, above the fray. I knew better. It was her battle braid. You are late, she said. Garage inspection ran long. She narrowed her eyes. You do not inspect garages at night. Tonight I did. The answer hung there, flimsy as a receipt in the wind. We both knew it. She put the phone down on the counter. A text thread glowed. Hearts. A photo of a sweaty mirror from the gym bathroom with a caption that pretended to be about hustle. The kind of picture that tries to look accidental and ends up looking like a confession. "If you say one more word about Ava to her husband," she said, each syllable like a nail, "I am gone." "You already said that?" "I will pack tonight." "Then you will want to pack," I said, and walked past her to brush my teeth with the kind of deliberate attention that drives a guilty person out of their skin. I could feel her eyes on my back, measured, judging, waiting for some sign that I still cared. But emotion is a door you stop opening once enough thieves have walked through it. In the mirror, toothpaste foamed like a bad alibi. I watched my own reflection the way a witness studies surveillance footage, trying to decide whether the man in the frame was capable of the thing he'd been accused of. The truth is, everyone is capable. The only difference is who gets caught and who learns to make peace with the version of themselves that slips through the cracks. Lena didn't follow me. She didn't need to. Her silence was a net she cast wide, knowing I would eventually tangle myself in it. She was good at that, setting traps made of half-finished sentences and walking away like she already knew the outcome. Maybe she did. Maybe I did too. I rinsed my mouth and listened to the hum of the refrigerator, the clock ticking in the hallway, the soft buzz of her phone as another message arrived. Someone else's attention, eager and uncomplicated. I couldn't blame her. Familiarity makes even love sound like a used car warranty, full of clauses, fine print, and the creeping suspicion you're being overcharged. When I came back to the kitchen, she was gone, but her phone wasn't. She had taken the stairs slowly on purpose, daring me to look. I didn't. Not because I trusted her, but because I didn't trust myself to stop once I started scrolling. Some truths are better caught in the periphery than held in the hand. I poured a glass of water and stared out the window. The neighbor across the street was still awake, his TV flickering blue on the ceiling. A shadow moved behind the curtain, someone pacing, maybe arguing, maybe just restless. Every house on the block looked calm from the outside, but I had long suspected that every address hosted its own quiet storm. People don't break in public. They corrode in private. Lena's suitcase clicked open upstairs. The metal teeth of the zipper sounded like a verdict. I imagined her packing the essentials first. Phone charger, skincare routine, the perfume she wore when she wanted to remind herself she was still desirable. She would take only what she needed to survive for a while, because she expected I would call her bluff. I wasn't sure whether I would. Maybe she thought Ava was a threat because of what I'd said to her husband. Maybe she thought I was jealous. Maybe she was right. Ava had crossed a line, but not the one Lena feared. I didn't want Ava. I wanted her to stop pretending she was innocent when she was playing with fire in a room full of gasoline. Her husband was too nice, too trusting, and I was tired of watching people ruin good things for sport. But that wasn't my story to fix. I had enough cracked glass under my own feet. I walked to the couch and sat in the half-light, the kind of shadow that makes a man start measuring his life in mistakes instead of milestones. I thought about Park's warning, about the shortcut I'd ignored last month because the builder reminded me of my father, quiet, stubborn, and one fine away from shutting down for good. I thought about the report I'd filed last week that would cost another man his job because the numbers didn't care about the reasons behind them. Fairness is a scale with no memory. It doesn't care who you were yesterday. Upstairs, a drawer slammed, a suitcase rolled. I imagined the look on her face, the one she practiced in the mirror, the expression of a woman leaving not because she wants to, but because staying would cost her something she refuses to spend. Pride, maybe, or the last clean corner of her heart. I didn't go after her. I didn't stop her. Not because I wanted her to go, but because I wasn't sure what I would say if she asked me to give her a reason to stay. Love is easy when it's fresh, hard when it's honest, impossible when it starts keeping score. The front door opened. Hinges sighed. Then a pause, long enough for regret to get a running start. The door closed. The silence afterward was too complete, like the house had been holding its breath and finally exhaled. I sat there until the dark turned into a kind of mourning that doesn't deserve the name. I didn't chase her, I didn't drink, I didn't sleep. I just existed, the way a room does after everyone leaves it, still arranged but no longer inhabited. Eventually, I stood and picked up her phone from the counter. Not to read it, just to turn it face down. If there was a story in there, it wasn't mine anymore. I washed the glass I'd used, put it back in the cabinet, straightened the bowl of limes. Then I turned off the lights, one by one, like closing the eyes of a body you don't have the right to mourn. Tomorrow, I would go to work. I would file reports. I would inspect things built by people who hope no one looked too closely. I would make choices no one would thank me for. And somewhere between the laws I enforce and the rules I break to feel human, I would decide whether the man in the mirror was still worth brushing his teeth for. Mr. Baines has been the caretaker of the mill since long before anyone thought decor would fix the foundation of a town. He wears a key ring like a bracelet and knows which doors stick in summer. He also knows things about the cameras that are only in maintenance logs because he wrote them there. "The rear stairwell," he said, the next afternoon when I found him dusting a light cage in the freight lobby. Camera 3B points too high. In a storm, the rain on the lens sets the motion detector off, and it records nothing anyone wants to watch. "Like a blind spot," I said. He looked at me the way men look when they have daughters. "Like a mistake that folks who need it pretend is a feature. Is it getting fixed? Been on the punch list 6 months? Folks love their ribbon cuttings. They love their corrections less." I nodded. I did not ask him to show me footage. I asked him if anyone had cloned a caretaker keycard. He frowned and said that would be a neat trick since he kept his on a chain because he had a habit of leaving it near the coffee maker. It is funny how confession slips out when shame is busy with something else. "Thanks," I said. "You stirring a pot, Nate?" "I am skimming scum," I said. He laughed, and it sounded like a broom on old tile. The planning board meets in a room that used to be a library. The shelves are still there, empty except for dust, and a poster from a reading initiative that died in its second year. Dylan's gym lease had a variance attached to it when they did the build-out. That variance allowed a temporary corridor to count as egress while they installed a rated fire door. The door was supposed to have been installed 2 months ago. The developer asked for an extension. The extension lapsed. As a resident, you can stand at the microphone and ask questions. You cannot accuse. You cannot throw stones. You can ask if the fire door in Corridor C has been installed yet and whether the door closer is rated, and whether the path of travel is still obstructed by the stacked crates from the event office. You can ask if a business is operating an exercise class while that corridor doubles as emergency egress. And you can nod when the board chair says that the building department will schedule a re-inspection, and you can keep your face empty while Dylan shifts his weight in the back row and glances at his phone. That night, Tess from the HOA chat sent me blurry photos that made their own kind of sense. They showed Lena and Dylan carrying a stage light down the service hall, her hair in a knot, his hat pulled low, both of them with the look of people who forget that cameras do not care about angles. The photos leaked into the block chat like black dye into a bucket of rinse water. People pretended they did not enjoy it. People enjoy everything. "You are harassing my friends," Lena said on the phone when she called, voice sharp as a tack. "Back off." "Do not threaten me," I said, and I kept my tone even. I did not say she was being recorded. In our state, one party can record a call. I made notes after, time and date and summary. Contemporaneous records make a judge nod. I hoped I would never need one. The Riverwalk curves by the mill where the old culvert mouth yawns like a bad story anyone can fall into if they are not watching their feet. The air there always smells of damp stone and metal filings, as if the place is still half occupied by the ghosts of machinists who never bothered to clock out. The bricks sweat even in winter, and the pigeons look as though they have been dipped in the same gray soot that coats the mill's abandoned smokestacks. The culvert's mouth is wide enough for a child to crawl into, and more than one has, though the city posts a warning sign every spring when the floodwaters rise. The sign is useless. Curiosity has no respect for printed plastic. The shed stood back from the path behind a chain-link fence topped with 3 ragged twists of barbed wire that drooped like tired eyebrows. A paper sign, half laminated and already peeling at the corners, announced storage for festival equipment. The font was cheerful, the tape holding it was not. The lease roster taped inside the glass listed a DBA I had seen on the gym's sponsorship flyers. The same name printed in bold under the words Platinum Community Partner. It is amazing how often people who think they are clever forget that leases are boring and public, stacked in courthouse drawers, or searchable on city databases no one bothers to hide. Paperwork is where hubris goes to have its mugshot taken. I parked on a public street, not too close, because proximity is its own kind of confession. The meter misread the time, so I fed it 2 extra quarters for luck. A jogger passed, earbuds in, ponytail swinging like a metronome. A city worker scraped gum from the bricks with the resignation of a man who once dreamed of sculpting marble. Ordinary life, the camouflage I wear when I need to be invisible. When the shed door opened, I did not jump. I let my eyes lift just enough to catch the movement, the way a cat will pretend not to stare at a bird. Dylan wheeled out an e-bike with a backpack slung over one shoulder, the zipper half closed, one strap frayed. He glanced my way with that lizard flick of a look that says he sees everything and nothing, a reflexive scan for danger rather than a considered act of recognition. Then his eyes snapped back because my truck is known, and he is dumb but not blind. That truck has been in too many photos, parked near too many problems. I should have sold it years ago, but sentiment is a quiet saboteur. He pushed hard on the pedals, chain squealing like it hadn't seen oil since the day he stole the bike. I stood up and walked, not ran, because running would have been loud, and loud invites attention, and attention invites questions. When he hit the path, I cut down the stairs 2 at a time, met him at the rail, and slapped a neon zip tie on his seat post as he swore and veered left. The zip tie flapped behind him like a clown's tie, bright green against the slate morning, a joke written in fluorescent ink. It is a harmless trick that is not so harmless if you make people look at it later on a video, freeze frame the moment a known associate flees a restricted area with contraband in his backpack. The law has many tools. Humiliation is the one it polishes most lovingly. He did not fall. He did not give me the satisfaction. He pumped away along the wet path, a man chased by a color, wheels spitting mist. The backpack thumped against his spine, and I wondered what he had inside. Cash, receipts, something that smelled like gasoline, or maybe just his lunch. Criminals rarely think they are criminals. They think they are misunderstood entrepreneurs with a talent for shortcuts. I waited until he vanished behind the bend where the river walk narrows and the sycamores lean in like gossiping old women. Then I stepped to the shed door and took pictures through the glass with my phone. The screen smudged, but the lens was clean enough. Stacks of plastic festival wristbands, cheap neon loops waiting for wrists that would sweat beer and regret. A banner for the gala, the annual fundraiser with its champagne stains disguised as gold filigree. None of it illegal. All of it ugly when placed next to a lease that forbids storage of flammable staging materials in that exact location. Bureaucracy is boring until it isn't. I did not break in. I did not touch the lock. I took pictures and stepped away, a citizen with eyes. The law likes witnesses more than heroes. Heroes improvise, witnesses document. The path camera on the footbridge blinked, a red diode winking like it wanted to share a private joke. Later, I would pull that public feed by request. Later, I would have a date and a time when my wife drove along the path in her sedan with a duffel I recognized from our closet, the one with the broken zipper she always threatened to replace. I would watch the footage in a dark room, my face reflected in the monitor like a stranger trapped under ice. But that moment had not happened yet. All I had was a damp morning, a cooling coffee, and the knowledge that the shed, ordinary, ugly, forgettable, was the seam where 2 stories were beginning to split. I walked the Riverwalk twice more, once forward and once back, clocking details the way a tailor measures cloth. The distance from bench to stairs, the angle of the camera, the timing of the jogger's loop. A police cruiser rolled past on the upper road, its windows up, its occupants bored. By noon, the sky had cleared just enough to make promises it wouldn't keep. I moved to the overlook where the river widens, set my cup on the rail, and scrolled back through the photos. Wristbands, banner, crate, shadows, the reflection of my own hand in the glass. I annotated each one, added geotags, saved duplicates to cloud storage under an alias I created 3 years ago and have used only twice. Paranoia is just caution that got promoted. The zip tie would bother Dylan. He would cut it off, curse, maybe even keep it as a reminder. But the point wasn't the plastic. It was the fact that I got close enough to touch his bike, close enough to smell the detergent on his jacket. I wanted him to remember that, to feel the invisible thread tied between us. Leverage is not always a file or a fingerprint. Sometimes it is the echo of a hand where it should not have been. The shed door closed again around 2, a different man this time, bald, carrying a clipboard and the board gait of someone paid hourly. He looked like the kind of man who eats sandwiches from vending machines and tells everyone he's in events. I didn't bother photographing him. He was a pawn, a placeholder, a signature on a lease that someone else forged. Hours later, after the shadows lengthened and the tourist couples thinned, I circled back to my truck. The meter had expired, but no ticket waited behind the wiper. A small victory, but victories add up. I drove the long way home, crossing 2 bridges, circling the block twice before pulling into my street. Habit, not fear. Fear is a spotlight, habit is a dimmer switch. At home, the kitchen smelled of lemon soap and the faint perfume my wife uses when she wants to seem like she isn't trying. The duffel with the broken zipper was gone from the closet. I told myself she had taken it to be repaired, that it meant nothing, that the human brain is a factory that manufactures coincidences when truth is backordered. I made dinner, ate half, stored the rest in the fridge with a label and the date, as if I were leaving evidence for a future version of myself to analyze. That night I dreamed of the culvert, wide and black, the river sucking at its edges like a hungry throat. Dylan rode past again and again, the neon zip tie growing longer each time until it wrapped the path like crime scene tape. My wife stood on the far bank holding the duffel, staring at the water as if it were a mirror that finally told the truth. I tried to shout, but the dream had no sound, only the wet hush of wheels on stone. When I woke, I wrote everything down, because memory is a thief, and I have been robbed before. Then I checked the time-stamped photos, the backup files, the duplicate cloud folders, all still there, all waiting. I had 10 days before the city inspector made his rounds, 10 days before the lease violation became a fine, a hearing, a matter of public record. 10 days for the people who thought they were clever to remember that paperwork has teeth, and somewhere in those 10 days I would request the camera feed. I would watch my wife drive that path, the duffel on the seat beside her, and I would decide whether the story I was in was still one I recognized or whether the plot had quietly folded itself into something darker while I wasn't looking. Either way, the river would keep flowing, the culvert would keep yawning, and the shed would keep pretending to be nothing more than a box full of wristbands and banners. But I would know better, and so would Dylan. And so, eventually, would everyone else. Because that is the thing about a neon zip tie. Once you've seen it, you can't pretend it isn't there. Revenge is best served petty and legal. Our home's thermostat schedule was something I set up because I am the kind of man who believes that the thermostat schedule will save a marriage. When Lena moved her staging business into high gear, she cloned the schedule to use in a model home for a video shoot. She never changed the credentials. She never considered that an exasperated man could still log in to his own settings and toggle a zone on in the middle of the night so that sprinklers misted a room at dawn, when workers popped a valve they should have left shut. I did not flood a home. I did not break anything. I turned on a zone that was designed to be on, and a careless installer left a cap off a line, and water-kissed velvet chairs at the exact second that Ava started a live story about sparkle at sunrise. It was almost art. Mascara tracks. A boy with a mop slipping, phones up, a crowd that smelled drama like bakers smell yeast. Lena's glare when she found me in the doorway could have scorched metal. Dylan was there too, thick neck and a scent like cologne trying too hard. He stepped into my space, did the shoulder bump men do when they cannot decide if they want to shove you or hug you into submission. I did not step back. He put a hand on my chest. That hand pushed. I slapped him. One hard, open-handed, controlled slap that cracked in the quiet like a switch. He blinked like he had not been slapped as an adult since puberty, and could not believe the world had allowed it. "That is for lying in my garage," I said. He reached up, eyes bright. I took a step back, palms visible, and smiled like a man who knows the camera loves angles. Milo in my office is the kind of clerk who cannot stop remembering things. He remembers plate numbers and fine print. He remembers that the fire door in Corridor C was ordered but never installed. He remembers where the invoice got hung up. He also remembers that the developer sent us a test photo of the corridor as proof of temporary compliance, and that test photo had a reflection in the window that included an event crate stacked where a stretcher should go. "Want to see something interesting?" he asked, pulling a paper file no one else would have found in a week. "I am not the one who needs to see it," I said. "Schedule the re-inspection with someone else. Send them." "I thought you might want to make sure it gets done," he said. "I want it done right," I said, and he knew what that meant. Later that day, Tess sent me an anonymous DM that smelled like breath mints and panic. A screenshot of a story from a private account that Lena keeps like a guilty tooth. A geotag at 2:03 a.m. at the culvert. The photo was arty. A lip print on a crushed can, a wrist with a gym band, pretend careless. Rye N on concrete. The kind of styling you do when you believe everyone is asleep. The culvert mouth sounded like a train parked somewhere behind a curtain. The river was up after a night of stubborn rain. I stood on the public path and looked down at the grit and crap that had collected where the town throws what it cannot metabolize. There was the lipstick on the can. There was a scuff on the railing that looked fresh. There was a gym band, red, looped on a bolt head. It could have been anyone's band. It felt like a signature. By the time I got back to our block, everything had decided to happen at once. Ava's husband had the manila packet in his hand and a jaw that worked side to side like he was trying to grind the word coward into powder. Dylan's truck rolled slow, an animal testing fences. Lena stepped onto the porch with hair that told me she had not slept. Folks came out. Phones rose. A chorus built that sounded like shame set to a pop beat. "Stop filming," Lena said. "This is private." "Nothing is private," Tess said from the sidewalk. "You taught us that." Dylan put his face close to mine and spoke in a stage whisper, like he was auditioning for the part of Scary Man. "You want to push code issues at my place, Inspector? You better hope nobody finds out you sabotaged it." "I do not push," I said. "I read. And if anyone accuses me of sabotage, I will enjoy that particular fight." Ava's husband flung the packet onto the lawn. Papers fluttered around my boots like big dumb leaves. Lena looked at them and then looked at me, and something went out of her eyes that had been trying to stay lit. "It was not just Ava," she said. "It was me." The world did not tilt. It settled, the way a sheet settles when you let go and it falls where it was always going to fall. Villain mode is just you without your filter and with your homework done. I made a schedule. I wrote it down on a legal pad so I could cross off boxes. I called the department and asked if the re-inspection could be assigned to Santos because he does not mind crawling under corridors on a rainy day. I sent Santos a memo with photos of code issues, phrased without heat. I attached the maintenance log note about camera 3B. I did not underline. I did not bold. I do not need to shout to be heard. I backed up my phone to a fresh drive and archived my dashcam clips. I made a copy of the thermostat schedule. I stood in the garage of my own house and watched the rain tick against the door, and I felt calm for the first time in weeks. At 5:11 p.m., Mr. Baines called me with the voice of a man who has touched something greasy and does not know what it is. "Somebody cloned my keycard," he said, "or they borrowed it. Either way, the system shows my card entering the rear stairwell door in the middle of the night half a dozen times in the last month, and it shows it on the blind spot nights." "Thanks for telling me," I said. "I am telling the board, too," he said, "before anyone accuses me of not telling them." "You are a wise man," I said. "Do not make me regret that," he said. The festival dry run felt like a dress rehearsal for a parade of people pretending they did not know each other while stepping over extension cords. I stood near the rear doors and watched as Santos signed a temporary closure because the rated fire door still was missing, the closer was still missing, and the corridor still smelled like a candle factory lost a fight with a forklift. Dylan had to cancel classes for 2 weeks. That does not sound like much until you insert the words cash flow and landlord into the sentence. That night, Dylan came by my place and revved his engine at the curb like an adolescent who believes noise can fix shame. I stepped onto the lawn with a tire iron, not to swing, to drag the tip along the paint of his driver's door in a single crisp line that the eye would run to every time he approached the vehicle. "We are even for the shove," I said, and I spun the iron once in my palm because flourish is allowed when the line is clear. I told Lena the part she did not expect me to know, about the cloned keycard, about the caretaker's lanyard and Ava's stash of event passes, about the way Dylan had shown her a set of phone photos that looked like I was handling a door closer like a saboteur, when what I was doing was pointing at it during a daytime walkthrough, all angles, no context. Any one image is a liar if you starve it of sequence. He said if you tried to red tag the corridor, he would send them to the board, she said, small voice, small person. And you went along. Because I did not want you to lose your job. You did not want to lose your reputation, I said. Your brand cannot stage around scandal. My job is a problem for your posts. She flinched like I had swung a hammer and hit a nail that was for once exactly where it should be. That night, in a public lot behind the gym where anyone could watch me and no one could accuse me of tampering with anything important, I opened Dylan's car door with a coat hanger trick that a locksmith showed me after he locked himself out of the inspection van. I did not break the lock. I did not bend the door. I left no mark. I unsnapped the pollen filter cover at the cabin intake and slipped a small vial of commercially available wildlife deterrent into the slot. It is not illegal. It is not permanent. It makes a smell like a skunk lost a bet with a chemistry teacher. I left the filter where it was. I snapped the cover. I closed the door. I walked away. Some revenge is a day at the spa. This was a spa for my spite. If you want to ruin someone in a town like ours, you do not need a courtroom. You need an HOA meeting. You need a projector and a woman like Tess who can keep her voice calm while her eyes sing. She did not slander anyone. She put up public documents and screen captures with the names redacted, and then unredacted when people insisted the records were fake. She showed the lease roster at the shed. She showed the cross-listing for the gym sponsor. She showed my memo with the code issues and Santos's signature on the temporary closure. She showed a list of brand partners. She showed the email that pulled a post, citing concern about optics. Nobody bled. They got it. Officer Park showed up halfway through and stood in the back like a teacher who knows the class can self-correct if they feel watched. When it was done, she walked with me to my truck. "Stay clean," she said. "I am stainless," I said. "You are human," she said. "Do not forget that either." The forecast said the festival would get rain. The river said it would get angry. I spent the morning of the big day returning gear in the home that I had paid for, items that were in my name. I took pictures of every receipt. I sent courteous emails to every vendor. "Thank you for letting us try this piece. It does not fit our home after all." At the staging hall, a replacement couch arrived with the tag still hanging off a corner you could see on camera. No crime, just truth the eyes could feel. At the shed, I found a bag of pre-workout powder that promised focus and energy and delivered a chemical hiss. I poured a neat line along the concrete where Dylan slid his truck in on muscle memory. In dry weather, it would be a smudge at best. In rain, it would turn into a sticky paste you could not explain to a dry cleaner without using words you do not want to say out loud. By dusk, the sky had the color of a bruise over old bone. The culvert behind the mill took water like a man takes a punch he does not deserve. The garage lower levels shone like a mirror nobody asked for. I stood by the mixing board at the festival stage and said I was there to help the volunteer who had never worked the projector. He thanked me and then thanked me again when I volunteered to load a folder called Safety First. I did not put anything new in there. I simply placed a shortcut to a public folder from the maintenance log archive that included test clips from the hallway cam by camera 3B. People love shortcuts. They click them with joy. On cue, the feed rolled. A montage of cheerful PSAs about emergency exits. Then the clip of a caretaker hallway shot at night. The camera did not catch faces as faces. It caught shapes and movement and a duffel. It caught two people slipping in and out of the blind spot door. It caught the way a conscience looks when it holds breath. In the same minute, a heat sensor tripped the alarm in corridor C because water had found a wire where it should not have been, and the system did what it does. It howled. The crowd pivoted as one and looked at the lit exit signs like they were instructions to follow, not decorations to ignore. The rain came sideways, blown by a wind that had found purpose. Dylan ran. Of course he ran. He took the stairs in the garage 2 at a time, cursing at the slick that hugged the bottom level like a cheap trick. I followed at a pace you could call workmanlike. He turned and threw a wild swing that might have landed if I had forgotten I used to play baseball and still remember how to read a shoulder. I parried without theatrics, fed him his own momentum, then slapped him again. Open hand, crisp, public, on camera. For the threat on my job, I said. He tried to bull past me. He hit the ramp. His feet met the paste I had laid with such care. He did not fall like a cartoon. He slid like a man who just found out that gravity is not interested in what you think you deserve. He went down on one knee in a puddle that smelled like gym and shame. Tess filmed because Tess films when the town wants the record without wanting the responsibility. Lena caught up and grabbed my sleeve. Rain glued her hair to her forehead. Her eyes were wild with the realization that the game had left the playground and wandered into the street where cars do not break just because you have an idea. Please, she said. We can talk. I do not talk to co-conspirators, I said. I post schedules. Citations do not read like drama on paper. They read like headaches on letterhead. The inspector issued them. The sponsor emails went out. Ava's calendar turned into a blank, with holes shaped like promises. Lena's brand partners sent the kind of notes they send when they want to sound supportive while stepping off your porch. Dylan's landlord posted a notice of default with copy and paste language that could apply to any failed dream. None of this is criminal. All of it is ruin when your identity is a tower of stacked selfies and handshakes. I left my house key on the counter. I turned off the utilities in my name at midnight and told Lena the dates in a text that read like a schedule because schedules do not beg. I walked out into a rain that felt clean. At the exit ramp of the garage, Dylan tried one last thing because he is the kind of man who trusts reflex over thought. He angled his truck toward my old Ford like he meant to bump me into a lesson I should have learned earlier. I braked and popped the wheel left so his front passenger tire climbed the curb exactly where the ramp lip dropped into a little angle that would catch him if he did not know it was there. The culvert grate is not good at poetry. It is good at stopping what should not go where it wants to go. Dylan fishtailed and skated toward the mouth, airbag blooming like a white flag that smells like chemicals. His truck was never in real danger of going in. The angle is wrong, the guardrail is good steel, but it looked dramatic, which matters to men who live by attention. I stepped into the rain. The cameras on the ramp blinked. Officer Park's cruiser nosed into view, lights off, but authority on. I walked to Dylan's window and knocked twice. He cursed. The airbag sighed. I did not reach inside. I did not touch him. I bent, set my gloved hands under the vanity plate frame, and tugged until the screws gave. A plate held by vanity hardware is loyal to embarrassment, not torque. You do not get to ruin my life and keep your shine, I said, low enough for the dash cam to miss the words and my memory to keep them. I held the plate, heavy for a piece of metal that is mostly lye. I turned toward the culvert. The water snarled. I dropped the plate. It skittered on the concrete and kissed the edge and tipped in, caught once by a current that did not know it should be careful of symbols. Then it was gone. Park stepped up beside me. She was soaked to the bone and had the look of a woman who is tired of the movies people put on for her, when all she wants is everyone to obey physics and law. Reckless driving, she said, nodding toward Dylan. Failure to maintain control. Operating with faulty equipment if he has the nerve to point at that stench and call it a defect. He will, I said. He likes the story where the equipment failed him instead of the one where he failed the equipment. She gave me a side look. You done, Nate? I watched Lena on the far side of the ramp, makeup washing away in clean black threads. I watched the town gather, phones quiet for once. Nobody talking because the rain made it hard to pretend this was about anything but consequences. You told me not to say a word, I said to Lena across the hush, so I made sure everyone else did. Sirens pushed air. Rain hit harder. My pulse slowed to the speed of a man who has just emptied his hands and found them useful again.